The red light on the turnstile didn't just blink, it mocked me. It was a dull, lethargic, crimson pulse, accompanied by a sound that can only be described as the digital equivalent of a wet fart. Beep! I stood there in the lobby of the Oak Creek Estates Community Center, dressed like a neon gladiator. I had my lifting belt slung over one shoulder, my knee sleeves pulled up, and enough chalk on my hands to dust a gymnast squad. My pre-workout was currently vibrating at a frequency that made my teeth itch. I was ready to pull 400 pounds off the floor. I was ready to fight gravity. What I wasn't ready for was a receptionist named Kyle, who looked like he was 12 years old and currently vibrating with terror. "Try it again, Kyle," I said, my voice calm but tight. The caffeine was hitting the rage phase. Kyle swallowed hard. His Adam's apple bobbed like a cork in a storm. I did, Mr. Miller. It's saying access denied, code 99. That's the admin lock." "Admin lock?" I leaned over the pristine white counter. "I pay $450 a month in HOA fees, Kyle. That includes the pool I don't use, the tennis courts I don't use, and this gym, which I definitely use. Why am I locked out?" Kyle typed something, his fingers trembling over the keyboard. He looked at the screen, then at me, then at the door to the back office, as if praying for a sniper to take him out. "It says, reason for suspension: aggressive auditory disturbances and intimidation of community wildlife." I blinked. "Community wildlife? What are you talking about? Did I scare a squirrel?" "It says, refer to Board President Linda Harrison." Of course. Linda, the Oak Creek Estates Homeowners Association Board President. A woman whose hair was sprayed into a helmet of blonde ambition so rigid it could deflect shrapnel. A woman who measured grass height with a ruler and had once fined a neighbor because his mailbox shade of oyster white was actually eggshell. "Is she in?" I asked, looking at the frosted glass door behind Kyle. "Technically, yes, but she said not to." I didn't wait for Kyle to finish. I bypassed the turnstile, which wasn't hard, considering it was waist-high and I'm 6'2", and marched toward the office. I didn't knock. I just opened the door. Linda was sitting behind a desk that was too large for the room, surrounded by motivational posters that said things like, "Kindness is free, but fines are mandatory," and "A tidy neighborhood is a happy neighborhood." She was holding a cup of tea with two hands, looking like a serene dictator. "Mason," she said, not even looking up from her stack of papers, "I assume you found the turnstile uncooperative." "Uncooperative?" It treated me like a trespasser, Linda. "Kyle says I'm banned for intimidating wildlife. Care to explain before I lose my mind? Because the pre-workout is telling me to lift something heavy, and right now this desk looks like a good candidate." Linda finally looked up. She offered a tight, terrifying smile. "Sit down, Mason. Or stand. I suppose you prefer standing. It's more aggressive." "I'm not aggressive, Linda. I'm trying to work out. What is this about?" She pulled a file from the stack. It was labeled Miller Mason, 742 Oak Lane, Violations. The file was alarmingly thick. "Tuesday," she said, opening the folder. 3 days ago. You were performing, what do you call it, that violent thing where you throw the bar down?" "A deadlift," I said. "And I don't throw it down. I control the descent. But when there is 400 pounds on the bar, Linda, it makes a noise when it hits the platform. That's physics. I can't negotiate with gravity." "You grunted," she said, tapping a piece of paper. "A primal roar, according to the witness statement." I exhaled forcibly. It was a heavy set. And, she continued, her eyes narrowing, Princess was in the lobby. She was visibly shaken. She hid under the vending machine for 20 minutes. That is the intimidation of community wildlife. I stared at her. Princess? Your poodle? The one with the pink dye job on her ears? First of all, Linda, why was your dog in the gym lobby? Isn't that a violation of Article 6, Section B regarding pets in common areas? Linda's eye twitched. Just a fraction. Princess is an emotional support animal for my role as president. It's a stressful job dealing with people like you. And because of your grunting and the seismic activity caused by your weights, you have violated the peaceful enjoyment clause of the community center. So you banned me? For 6 months, she said, closing the file with a finality that echoed in the small room. We are instituting a new silent gym policy. No dropping weights, no grunting, no chalk. We are replacing the free weights with more ellipticals and a stretching cage. A stretching cage? I felt the blood vessel in my forehead throb. Linda, I don't stretch. I lift. This is insane. I pay for this facility. You pay for the privilege of living in Oak Creek, she corrected, sipping her tea. Access to amenities is contingent on behavior. You are disruptive. You frighten the seniors. You frighten the dogs. You frighten Kyle. Kyle is frightened of his own shadow. 6 months, Mason. Use the time to find a more civilized hobby. Perhaps gardening. Though given the state of your hydrangeas, you might need a permit for that, too. I stood there, my hands clenched into fists, chalk dusting onto her pristine beige carpet. I wanted to scream. I wanted to flip the desk. But that's exactly what she wanted. She wanted the meathead to explode so she could call the cops and get a restraining order. I took a deep breath. I exhaled through my nose. Fine, I said, my voice dangerously low. You win, Linda. You control the gym. You control the turnstile. But you don't control me. I control the neighborhood, Mason, she said, turning back to her paperwork. Don't forget to wipe your feet on the way out. You're tracking white powder everywhere. I walked out. I ignored Kyle's pitying look. I walked out into the humid morning air, the sun just starting to peek over the perfectly manicured hedges of Oak Creek. I was banned. 6 months. My training cycle was ruined. The nearest commercial gym was 20 minutes away, cost $60 a month, and smelled like damp socks and Axe body spray. I got into my truck, a black Ford F-150 that Linda had tried to ban 3 times because it was commercially aggressive, and drove the 2 blocks to my house. I pulled into my driveway. It was a nice driveway. Wide, flat, reinforced concrete. I sat there, staring at the garage door. The anger was boiling in my gut, mixing with the caffeine, turning into something cold and hard. I control the neighborhood, she had said. I looked at the house 2 doors down. Linda's house. I could see her pristine lawn, her perfectly trimmed topiaries, her live, laugh, love flag fluttering in the breeze. She controlled the community property. I got out of the truck and walked to the edge of my driveway. I looked down at the concrete. I looked at the property line. I went inside and went straight to my office. I didn't change out of my gym clothes. I sat down at my desk, covered in chalk, and pulled out the massive binder I had received at closing. The Oak Creek Estate's covenants, conditions, and restrictions. Most people throw this in a drawer and forget about it. I had read it, vaguely, but now I was going to study it like it was the scripture. I flipped past the sections on fence height, past the sections on trash can placement, past the bizarre rule about holiday decorations being taken down by January 5th under penalty of death. I found it. Section 9. Recreational equipment. Permanent structures such as basketball hoops, batting cages, and tennis walls must be approved by the Architectural Review Committee. Okay. Permanent is out. Linda controls the committee. She'd deny a birdhouse if I built it. I kept reading. Temporary recreational equipment, including portable basketball hoops, soccer nets, and children's play sets, are permitted provided they are not left in the street overnight and do not impede the flow of traffic. Temporary. I grabbed a legal pad. What defines permanent? Usually it means poured footings, bolts in the ground, something you can't move in 24 hours. I picked up my phone and dialed Dave. Dave was my college roommate, a lawyer who specialized in corporate litigation and hated HOAs with the fire of 1,000 suns because his own HOA had once fined him for washing his car on a Sunday. "Mason," Dave answered. "It's 6:30 a.m. Unless you're in jail or you won the lottery, hang up." "I need a definition, Dave, legally speaking." I heard him groan and the rustle of sheets. "What did you do?" "Linda banned me from the gym. Aggressive auditory disturbances." Dave laughed. It was a dry, barking sound. "Of course she did. So what are you going to do? Sue? It'll cost you 10 grand in a year of your life." "No, I want to build a gym in my driveway." "Mason," Dave sighed, "check the CC&Rs. Section 4 usually prohibits exterior modifications." "I'm looking at Section 9. It allows temporary recreational equipment. If I buy a squat stand, a big one, and I don't bolt it to the concrete, is it temporary? Does it have wheels? Can it be dismantled?" "It's freestanding. Heavy as hell, but freestanding." "And what about noise? What's the noise ordinance here?" "City ordinance usually overrides HOA, unless the HOA rules are stricter and explicitly signed. But generally, quiet hours are 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. Why?" "Because," I said, looking out my window at Linda's house down the street. "I'm an early riser, Dave. I like to work out at 6 a.m. "Mason," Dave said, his voice waking up, a hint of glee creeping in. "Are you suggesting you are going to do CrossFit in your driveway at dawn?" "I'm suggesting I'm going to focus on my health, Dave, on my own property, with equipment that is technically temporary." "The impediment of traffic clause?" "My driveway is 30 feet long. I'll be 20 feet back from the curb." "And the aesthetics clause?" "It says equipment must be kept in good repair." "I'm buying Rogue, Dave. It's the Ferrari of gym equipment. It'll look beautiful." There was a pause on the line. Then Dave chuckled. "You know, if you don't bolt it down and you put it away or cover it, there's not much they can do. It's a gray area, a very loud, very heavy gray area. Can you come over for dinner tonight? Bring the big law books." "I'll bring the beer," Dave said. "This is going to be good." I hung up. I looked at the computer screen. I opened a new tab. Rogue Fitness. I didn't just want a squat stand. I wanted a Monster Light rig. I wanted a spiel bar. I wanted bumper plates. The colored ones, so they looked festive. I wanted a sled. I wanted a timer. A big bright LED timer that could be seen from space, or at least from Linda's bedroom window. I started adding to the cart. Monster Light 14. Freestanding rig, 3500. 385 lbs, HG 2.0, bumper set, $795. Ohio bar, black zinc, $295. Echo Dog sled, $200. 3/4-inch rubber stall mats, 20 count. The total was climbing past $5,000. It was money I had been saving for a vacation to Cabo. But this? This was better than Cabo. This was a vacation for my soul. I hit checkout. Then I realized something. My driveway was standard builder-grade concrete. It was fine for a minivan. It was not fine for dropping 300 pounds of steel repeatedly. It would crack. And if it cracked, Linda would cite me for failure to maintain exterior surfaces. I needed reinforcement. I opened Google. I needed a contractor, not a yes or no sir corporate contractor. I needed a guy who drove a beat-up truck and hated paperwork. I found a listing for Sully's Concrete and Paving. The website was just a picture of a sidewalk and a phone number. No logo. No mission statement. Perfect. I called the number. "Sully," a voice answered. It sounded like he had been gargling gravel. "Sully, this is Mason Miller. I have a driveway job. Need it done fast, need it done heavy." "How heavy?" "I'm going to be dropping weights on it, big weights." "Gym weights? Like a garage gym?" "Driveway gym." Sully paused. "You want to pour industrial pad in a residential driveway?" "Exactly. I want 5,000 psi mix, rebar reinforcement, 6 inches deep. I want it to be able to land a helicopter." "I like it," Sully said. "I can be there in an hour to quote it. Cash?" "Cash is king, Sully." I hung up. I stood up and walked to the window. Linda was outside now, watering her petunias with a hose that had a nozzle setting, probably labeled Gentle Mist. She looked happy. She looked victorious. She thought she had neutered the neighborhood nuisance. I smiled. "Enjoy the silence while it lasts, Linda," I whispered. "Because the storm is coming." By noon, Sully was in my driveway. Sully was a man shaped like a refrigerator box, wearing a neon yellow shirt that had clearly seen better decades. He chewed on an unlit cigar as he stomped around my driveway, kicking the existing concrete with a steel-toed boot. "Garbage," Sully grunted. "Standard 4-inch pour, probably no rebar. Wire mesh if you're lucky. You drop a deadlift here, you'll have a crack to China in a week." "That's what I figured. Can we rip it out and re-pour?" "Can do. Jackhammers, bobcat, dump truck. Gonna make a hell of a racket." He looked at me, a twinkle in his eye. "Neighbor's gonna love it." "The neighbor," I pointed to Linda's house, "is the reason we're doing this." Sully grinned around the cigar. "Spite pour. My favorite kind. I charge a premium for rush jobs, but I give a discount for sticking it to the HOA. Call it a wash." "When can you start?" "Tomorrow morning, 7 a.m. I got a crew coming off a job in the city. We can demo tomorrow, form and pour the day after. Cure for 3 days. You're lifting by next week." 7 a.m., I asked. "Is that legal?" Sully pulled a crumpled laminated card from his back pocket. "City noise ordinance says construction permitted 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. I follow the law, Mr. Miller. Always." "Perfect. Do it." The next morning, at 6:55 a.m., a convoy arrived. It wasn't just a truck. It was a parade of heavy machinery. A massive dump truck, a flatbed hauling a bobcat with a hydraulic breaker attachment, and 3 pickup trucks that looked like they had survived a war zone. They parked along the street, effectively narrowing the passage to a single lane. Engines idled, diesel fumes wafting through the crisp morning air. I stood on the porch, coffee in hand, watching the clock. 6:58 a.m. The crew was out, stretching, lighting cigarettes, adjusting their hard hats. 6:59 a.m. Sully looked at me. I nodded. 7 a.m. Cat, 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 cat. The hydraulic breaker on the bobcat slammed into my driveway. The sound was deafening. It was the sound of geology being violently rearranged. The ground shook. My windows rattled. 30 seconds later, Linda's front door flew open. She came running out in a silk floral bathrobe, her hair in rollers, screaming something that was completely inaudible over the sound of the jackhammer. She looked like a banshee summoned from the underworld of suburbia. She marched right up to the edge of the driveway, waving her arms. Sully was in the bobcat. He didn't stop. He just pointed to his ear protection and shrugged. Linda turned to me. She stormed up the walkway, her face a mask of purple rage. "What is this?" she shrieked. "What is happening?" "Driveway repair, Linda," I shouted over the noise. "Maintenance. Article 5, Section 2. Homeowners must maintain driveways in good condition." "This isn't maintenance. This is an earthquake. It's 7 a.m. City ordinance permits construction starting at 7 o'clock a.m. We're right on schedule." "I'm calling the police. I'm calling the city. You can't do this." "Go ahead," I yelled, raising my coffee mug in a toast. "Sully has the permits in the truck." She turned and ran back to her house, presumably to call the National Guard. 10 minutes later, a police cruiser rolled up. The officer looked annoyed. He got out, adjusted his belt, and walked over to me. Sully powered down the bobcat, bringing a sudden, ringing silence to the street. "Morning, officer," I said. "Morning. Getting a lot of noise complaints. From one specific caller." He glanced at Linda's house, where she was watching from the window, phone pressed to her ear. "Driveway repair," I said, handing him the permit I had taped to my front door. "Licensed contractor. Started at 7 o'clock on the dot." The officer looked at the permit. He looked at the shattered concrete. He looked at Sully, who gave him a nod. "Everything looks in order here," the officer said. "It's loud, but it's legal." "Thank you, officer." As he walked back to his car, I saw Linda slam her curtains shut. Sully fired the bobcat back up. Cat, 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 cat. It was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. 3 days later, the concrete was poured. It was a masterpiece. 6 inches of dark, smooth, 5,000 psi reinforced concrete. It was overkill. It was magnificent. Then came the delivery. A freight truck, the kind that usually delivers to warehouses, backed down the street. It beeped loudly. Beep, beep, beep. It parked directly in front of my house, blocking Linda's view of the retention pond she loved so much. The driver lowered the liftgate and started offloading pallets. Boxes marked Rogue Fitness, heavy boxes. I spent the next 2 days assembling. I built the rig in, the center of the driveway. It was 14 feet of matte black steel, rising into the air like a monolith. I bolted the pull-up bars. I laid down the rubber mats, a 20 by 20 foot square of black rubber that smelled of industrial progress. I set up the plyometric boxes. I stacked the bumper plates, greens, yellows, blues, reds. They gleamed in the afternoon sun. Neighbors walked by. Some slowed down, staring. "What is that?" asked Mrs. Higgins, walking her pug. "It's a jungle gym for adults, Mrs. Higgins," I said, tightening a bolt on the squat rack. "It looks very industrial," she said, clutching her pearls. "It's temporary," I assured her. "Strictly temporary." Linda didn't come out. She was watching, though. I could feel eyes on me. She was plotting. She was reading the bylaws. She was waiting for me to slip up. But I wasn't going to slip up. I was going to follow the rules. Specifically, the rules about time. I checked my phone. The weather for tomorrow morning was clear. 65 degrees. Perfect lifting weather. I set up my outdoor speaker. It was a high-end waterproof model with a bass boost feature. I placed it on one of the plyo boxes. facing away from the street, but sound travels. I went to bed at 9 p.m. that night. I slept the sleep of the just, the sleep of a man who is about to go to war. My alarm went off at 5:30 a.m. I got up. I drank my pre-workout. I put on my brightest neon orange shorts and a tank top that said, "Will lift for donuts." I laced up my lifting shoes. I walked out the front door. It was 5:55 a.m. The street was dark. The streetlights were humming. It was dead silent. The only sound was the distant hum of the highway. I walked to the rig. I turned on the work lights I had mounted on the garage. The driveway was bathed in LED brilliance. I started warming up. Arm circles, air squats, good mornings with an empty PVC pipe. I looked at my watch. 5:58, 5:59, 6:00 a.m. I hit play on my phone. Pantera's "Walk" exploded from the speaker. "Respect! Walk!" I grabbed the barbell. I loaded 2 45-pound plates. 135 pounds. A warm-up. I gripped the bar. Hook grip. Thumbs taped. I pulled. The bar flew up. I caught it in a power clean. I dipped and drove. Push press. I held it overhead for a second, savoring the victory. Then I let go. The bar fell from 7 feet in the air. 135 pounds of steel and rubber plummeted toward the earth. Boom! The sound was fantastic. A deep, resonant thud that vibrated through the rubber mats, through the 6 inches of reinforced concrete, and into the bedrock of the neighborhood. I smiled. I reloaded. 185 pounds. Boom! Lights flickered on in the house across the street. I reloaded. 225 pounds. Boom! And then, the front door 2 houses down flew open. Linda. She was wearing a different bathrobe this time. Pink silk. She also had what looked like oversized, noise-canceling headphones around her neck, which she frantically pulled over her ears as she sprinted down her driveway. "Stop!" she screamed, her voice muffled by the music and the distance. "Stop it right now!" I couldn't hear her. Pantera was too loud, and I was in the zone. I loaded 275 pounds. This was going to be loud. I set my feet. I grabbed the bar. I ripped it off the floor. The whip of the bar was beautiful. I cleaned it. I jerked it. I locked it out. I looked at Linda, who was now standing at the edge of my driveway, waving a flashlight like she was trying to land a plane. I locked eyes with her. I smiled, and I dropped the bar. Kaboom! The plates rattled against the concrete. The sound echoed off the brick facades of the houses. Linda screamed. I couldn't hear the words, but the body language said, "Murder." I checked my watch. 6:05 a.m. "Good morning, Linda," I shouted over the music, cutting the volume down just a fraction so she could hear me. "Great day for some gains, isn't it?" "You are arrested!" she shrieked, her face a mask of horror. "You are violating the peace. You are violating the noise ordinance. You are violating me." "Actually, Linda," I said, grabbing my water bottle, "it's 6:05 a.m. Quiet hours ended 5 minutes ago, and this is temporary recreational equipment. I'm just exercising my rights. And my glutes. I'm calling the police." "You do that," I said, dusting my hands with chalk. A large cloud of white dust drifted toward her. She coughed and swatted at it. "Tell them to bring a spotter. I'm going for a PR." She turned and ran back toward her house. I turned the music back up. The war had begun, and I had the heavy artillery. I watched Linda disappear into her house, her pink bathrobe flapping behind her like the cape of a very angry, very confused superhero. The door slammed shut with enough force to rattle her own windows, a delightful irony considering her complaint was about my noise. I turned back to the rig. My heart rate was sitting at a comfortable 140 beats per minute, fueled by caffeine, spite, and the sheer joy of heavy metal moving through space. "All right," I said to the empty street. "Back to work." I wasn't just doing random lifts. I had a plan. Today was a classic CrossFit benchmark workout. Grace, 30 clean and jerks for time at 135 pounds. It's a sprint. It's a lung burner. It's designed to make you question your life choices around rep number 20. But 135 was too light. 35 wouldn't make the ground shake enough. I decided to scale up. Heavy Grace, 225 pounds. I stripped the bar down and reloaded it. The bumper plates slid onto the sleeves with a satisfying shink sound. I chalked my hands again. The white powder drifted in the early morning air, settling on the black rubber mats like snow. I checked the time. 6:10 a.m. I hit the lap button on my timer. 3, 2, 1, go. I grabbed the bar. Rep 1. Clean. Catch. Drive. Lockout. Drop. Boom. Rep 2. Boom. Rep 3. Boom. By rep 10, I was breathing hard. The sweat was pouring down my face, stinging my eyes. The humidity of the morning was starting to rise, mixing with the smell of fresh concrete and rubber. It was the smell of freedom. I was on rep 12 when I saw the flashing lights reflected in the neighbor's living room window across the street. Blue and red, rotating. Silent for now. I didn't stop. Rep 13. Boom! A police cruiser rolled slowly up the street. It didn't use the siren, probably because it was 6:15 a.m., and the officer had more common sense than Linda. But the lights were enough to wake up anyone who had managed to sleep through the Pantera concert. The cruiser parked directly behind my truck, blocking the street. I dropped the bar on rep 14. Boom! I stood up, hands on my hips, chest heaving, trying to look casual while my lungs felt like they were on fire. The door of the cruiser opened. Out stepped Officer Miller. I recognized him. He was one of the regulars who patrolled the neighborhood, usually dealing with teenagers smoking weed in the park or speeding tickets on the main boulevard. He was a big guy, broad-shouldered, looking weary. He held a coffee cup in one hand and his radio in the other. Before he could even take 2 steps, Linda's front door flew open again. She must have been watching through the peephole. She didn't run this time. She marched. She had changed out of the bathrobe and was now fully dressed in what I called her combat realtor outfit. A stiff blazer, sensible slacks, and a face full of makeup that looked like it had been applied with a trowel in a hurry. "Officer!" she screamed, pointing a manicured finger at me. "Arrest him! Immediately!" Officer Miller sighed. I saw his shoulders slump. He took a long sip of his coffee before turning to address the approaching hurricane. "Morning, Ms. Harrison," Miller said, his voice flat. "It is not a good morning," Linda shrieked, stopping 3 feet from him. "Do you hear this? Do you see this? It's a war zone. He's exploding things. He's rioting." Miller looked at me. I was standing on my rubber platform, shirtless now, sweating, chalk on my chest, a 225-pound barbell at my feet. "Mr. Miller?" The officer nodded at me. "Officer Miller?" I nodded back. "Good morning." "We got a call," Miller said, pulling a small notepad from his pocket. "Multiple calls, actually, all from one number. Report says, domestic terrorism, use of illegal explosives, and creating a public nuisance with intent to harm." "Explosives?" I laughed, breathless. That's a bit dramatic, even for Linda. He's dropping bombs, Linda yelled. Every 10 seconds, boom, boom, my china cabinet is shaking. My dog is catatonic. Look at this monstrosity. She gestured wildly at my rig. It's an eyesore. It's an illegal structure. Officer Miller walked up the driveway. He stopped at the edge of the rubber mats. He looked at the rig. He looked at the barbell. He looked at the plates. Rogue, Miller said. Nice stuff. Thanks, I said. Saved up for it. Is that a monster light rig? Yeah, 3 3 steel, 11 gauge, it's solid. Miller nodded appreciatively. Then he turned back to duty mode. All right, look, it's early, Mason. The complaints are about the noise. I know, I said, wiping sweat from my forehead. But I checked the ordinances, officer. Quiet hours end at 6 o'clock a.m. It's 6:18 a.m. That's for standard noise, Linda interrupted, stepping onto the grass. This is industrial noise. This is commercial noise. You can't run a factory in a residential zone. It's not a factory, Linda, I said. It's a home gym. Temporary recreational equipment. It's louder than a jackhammer, she insisted. Officer, measure it. I demand you measure it. I looked up the statute. Section 12B. Continuous noise exceeding 65 decibels at the property line is a violation. Miller looked at her, then at me. She's right about the code, actually. If it's sustained noise over a certain limit, it can be a nuisance. It's not sustained, I argued. It's impulse noise. A drop takes less than a second. Measure it! Linda screamed. Miller sighed again. He walked back to his cruiser and reached into the passenger seat. He pulled out a yellow handheld device. A decibel meter. He walked back to the property line, the invisible border between my driveway and the strip of grass that separated my house from my other neighbor, Mr. Henderson, who was currently standing on his porch in his pajamas, watching with a bowl of cereal in his hand. All right, Miller said, holding the device up. Go ahead. Do what you were doing. You want me to lift? Yeah, replicate the noise. I grinned. With pleasure. I walked back to the bar. I needed to make sure this was a good rep. I tightened my belt. I grabbed the bar. Wait, Linda shouted. Wait for the wind to die down. I want an accurate reading. We waited 5 seconds. The wind died down. Go, Miller said. I ripped the bar off the floor. The adrenaline was spiking again. I cleaned it. The weight felt lighter now, fueled by the audience. I dipped, drove, and locked it out overhead. I held it there for a moment. Dropping in 3, 2, 1. I released the bar. Crash boom. The sound was sharp, violent, and glorious. We all looked at Officer Miller. He was staring at the little digital screen. Linda rushed over to him. Well, is he going to jail? Miller squinted at the screen. Registering, 88 decibels at peak impact. Aha! Linda threw her hands up. 88. The limit is 65. Arrest him. Confiscate the equipment. Hold on, Miller said, raising a hand. The limit is 65 for sustained noise, like a generator or a leaf blower running constantly. For impulse noise, like a hammer striking a nail, or a car door slamming, or dropping weights. The limit is higher during daylight hours. How much higher? Linda demanded, her voice trembling. Miller tapped the screen. City ordinance allows for impulse noise up to 90 decibels between 6 a.m. and 9 p.m. He's at 88. Silence. Absolute, beautiful silence. 88? Linda whispered. 2 decibels under the limit, ma'am, Miller said, putting the device away. Technically, he could drop it a little harder and still be legal. I resisted the urge to do a victory dance. Instead, I just chalked my hands again. I'll try to keep it down, though. I'm a good neighbor. This is ridiculous, Linda sputtered. The device is broken. Your equipment is faulty. I want a sergeant out here. Ms. Harrison. Miller's voice dropped an octave. It was the cop voice now. I have calibrated this device myself. The law is the law. Mr. Miller is operating within the legal time frames and noise limits. If you call 911 again for a non-emergency, I will have to cite you for misuse of emergency services. Do we understand each other? Linda's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. She turned a shade of red that clashed horribly with her blazer. She looked at me, then at the rig, then at Miller. This isn't over, she hissed. The HOA board meets on Thursday. We'll see what the bylaws have to say about industrial eyesores. She spun on her heel and stomped back to her house. Officer Miller watched her go, then turned back to me. He shook his head, a small smile playing on his lips. 88 decibels, he said. You cut that close. Calculated risk, I said. Thanks, officer. Hey, he nodded at the barbell. Your form is decent, but you're catching it a little forward, heavy on the toes. Sit back on your heels more. I blinked. You lift? Miller patted his stomach. Used to, before the graveyard shift, and the donuts ruined me. Nice setup, Mason. Just try not to make me come back out here, all right? She's a pain in the ass, but she's persistent. I'll be careful, I promised. He got back in his cruiser and drove away. I turned back to the bar. I had 15 reps left. I finished Grace in 4 minutes and 12 seconds, a personal record. The rest of that first week became a game of cat and mouse, if the mouse was a 220-pound man dropping heavy objects, and the cat was a middle-aged woman with a clipboard and too much time on her hands. On Tuesday, I woke up to find a letter taped to my front door. It wasn't in an envelope. It was just a piece of paper with bold red text, taped with blue painter's tape, presumably to avoid damaging the paint, which would be a violation. Notice of violation. To Mason Miller. From Oak Creek Estates, HOA Architectural Review Committee. Subject, unapproved exterior structure. Black steel skeleton. Dear homeowner, it has come to our attention that you have erected a metal structure in your driveway. As per Article 4, Section C, no permanent play structures, pergolas, or gazebos may be erected without prior written approval. You have 24 hours to remove the structure or face a fine of $100 per day. I took the letter down, walked into my garage, and grabbed my tools. I didn't remove the rig. I dismantled 2 bolts on the uprights and lowered the pull-up bar. I laid the uprights down on the driveway. It took me 10 minutes. Technically, it was no longer erected. It was now stored materials. When Linda drove by slowly in her Lexus at 5:00 p.m. to inspect, she slowed to a crawl. She saw the rig lying flat on the ground. She frowned. She couldn't find me for a standing structure if it wasn't standing. Wednesday morning, 5:55 a.m. I went out, bolted the uprights back up, 5 minutes with an impact driver, and started my workout. Boom! Linda came out at 6:01 a.m., holding a camera. She stood on the sidewalk, filming me. Documentation, she shouted. I'm documenting the violation. Good morning, Linda, I yelled mid-burpee. Make sure you get my good side, it's the left. She stood there for 20 minutes, filming. It was honestly a little motivating. Having a nemesis really pushes you to keep your form strict. You don't want to fail a rep when the enemy is watching. On Thursday, she tried a new tactic. I came out at 5:50 a.m. to set up. I noticed something wet. My driveway was soaked. Not just damp. Flooded. There was a garden hose snaking from Linda's side yard, over the fence, and the nozzle was positioned perfectly to spray a continuous arc of water onto my rubber mats. It was a slip hazard. A death trap for lifting. I stared at the hose. This was sabotage. This was war. I didn't get mad. I got creative. I walked over to the hose. I didn't turn it off. I picked up the nozzle. I walked it back to the property line. I aimed it directly at her prize-winning rose bushes, the ones she entered in the county fair every year, the ones that required very specific, minimal watering to avoid root rot. I propped the nozzle up on a rock, locking the trigger open. Then I went inside, grabbed a squeegee, dried off my mats, and started my workout. When Linda came out at 7:00 a.m. to retrieve her hose and gloat, she found her rose garden turned into a swamp. The scream she let out was louder than any deadlift I had ever dropped. She couldn't even blame me. She had left the hose running. I just relocated the output. Friday was the tipping point. I was doing back squats, heavy triples. I was resting between sets, sitting on a plyo box, drinking water. I saw a figure walking up the street. It was a guy. He was wearing a baggy t-shirt and gym shorts. He looked tentative. He stopped at the end of my driveway. It was Tom, the guy who lived 3 streets over. I knew him vaguely. He drove a Subaru and always waved. "Hey," Tom said, looking at the rig. "Hey," I said. Is that a rogue rig?" "It is." Tom looked around, checking for spies. "I heard the noise, all the way over on Elm Street. My wife was complaining, but I kind of liked it." I laughed. "Glad to be of service." "I was going to the community gym," Tom said, looking down at his shoes. "But it's closed. Renovation or something. And before that, Linda yelled at me for sweating too much on the treadmill. Said it was unhygienic." "Yeah, she banned me for breathing too loud." Tom looked at the barbell. "I haven't squatted in a rack in 2 years. The community gym only has a Smith machine." I stood up. I looked at the bar. I looked at Tom. "You got lifting shoes?" I asked. "In my bag," he said, patting his gym sack. "Put 'em on," I said. "Work in. I'm doing triples at 315. We can strip it down if you need to." Tom's face lit up like a kid on Christmas. "Serious?" "Yeah, just sign a waiver." "You have a waiver?" "No, just promise not to sue me if you drop a weight on your foot." "Deal." Tom laced up. He was actually pretty strong. We spent the next hour trading sets. The sound of 2 guys lifting, cheering each other on, and dropping weights was significantly louder than just me. At 6:45 a.m., another neighbor walked by. Mike. He was walking his golden retriever. Mike was a big guy, a former college football player who had let himself go a bit. He stopped and watched us. "Looking strong, boys," Mike called out. "Join in," I yelled. "Plenty of iron." Mike laughed. I'm too old for that stuff. Bad knees." "We got a sled." I pointed to the rogue dog sled sitting in the corner. "Zero impact, just pure lung pain. Good for the knees." Mike hesitated. He looked at the community center in the distance, which was currently dark and locked. He looked at the sled. "Tie the dog to the fence," I said. By 7 a.m., I had Tom squatting and Mike pushing the sled up and down the driveway. That was the moment Linda walked out. She froze. She had expected to see me, alone, a pariah in my own driveway. Instead, she saw 3 men, 3 neighbors, laughing, high-fiving, creating a sense of community. She marched over to the property line. "What is this?" she demanded. "Is this a commercial enterprise now? Are you running a gym? That is a violation of zoning laws. You cannot run a business from a residential property." "No money changing hands, Linda," I said, spotting Tom on his last rep. "Just friends working out. Freedom of assembly. First Amendment. Look it up." You are disturbing the peace. Mike lives next to you, I pointed at Mike, who was gasping for air by the sled. Mike, are you disturbed? Mike stood up, hands on his knees, grinning. Honestly, Linda, I feel great. Haven't felt this good in years. Linda stared at Mike like he had just stabbed her in the back. You are encouraging this? Better than the treadmill, Linda, Mike said. And nobody yells at me for sweating. Linda's eyes narrowed. She pulled out her phone. I'm calling a special session of the board. This stops. This stops now. She stormed off. She's gonna try to kill it, Tom said, racking the weight. Let her try, I said. I've got a lawyer coming over for stakes tonight. We're going to find every loophole in the book. The weekend was quiet. Too quiet. I knew Linda was working. She was probably scouring the internet for precedents, printing out binders of regulations, and whipping the other board members into a frenzy. I used the time to upgrade. I went to the hardware store. I bought industrial string lights. I hung them from the top of the rig to the garage, creating a canopy of warm light. It looked like a hipster beer garden, but with barbells. I bought a whiteboard, a big one. I mounted it on the side of the house. I wrote, "The driveway." Barbell club hours, 6 o'clock a.m. 8 o'clock a.m. membership fee. $0. Rules. 101. Don't be a jerk. 2. Drop the weights. 3. No Linda allowed. On Monday morning, the true battle began. I walked out at 5:50 a.m. There were 4 people waiting. Tom, Mike, and 2 others I didn't know. One was a woman named Sarah from down the block, who looked like she could bench press a Buick. The other was a teenager named Jake, the kid who worked at the grocery store. Word travels, Tom said, shrugging. We heard you have a rig, Sarah said. The gym at my work is closed for renovations. Can I lift? Grab a bar, I said. We had 5 people. We had to rotate stations. It was chaotic. It was loud. It was amazing. At 6:30 a.m., a white van pulled up. City Code Enforcement was stenciled on the side. A man in a uniform stepped out. He held a clipboard. He looked miserable. Linda was suddenly there, appearing from behind her hedges like a magician. There, she pointed. Officer, look at the crowd. It's an unauthorized gathering. It's a commercial gym. Look at the sign. The code enforcement officer walked up the driveway. The music stopped. We all stopped. Sir, the officer said to me, I have a complaint about an unlicensed business operating in a residential zone. It's not a business, I said. I don't charge anyone. These are guests. He has a sign, Linda shrieked. Membership fee $0. That implies a fee structure exists. It implies satire, Linda, I said. The officer looked at the sign. He suppressed a smirk when he read rule number 3. Are you selling any goods or services? The officer asked. Selling water, protein shakes, personal training? Nope. Bring your own water. We just lift together. Is the equipment permanent? Nope. Uprights are bolted, but can be removed in 10 minutes. It's temporary recreational equipment. The officer looked at Linda. Ma'am, if no money is changing hands and the equipment is temporary, this is just a gathering. It's no different than a book club or a barbecue. A barbecue doesn't sound like a bomb going off, Linda yelled. We already checked the noise with the police, I interjected. We are under 90 decibels. Impulse noise. The officer scratched his head. Look, I can't shut it down based on zoning. It's not a business, but he looked at the cars parked on the street. You got a lot of cars here. If they block the flow of traffic, that's a violation. We'll move them, Mike said instantly. I'll park in my driveway. Tom can park in yours. We'll carpool. Fine, the officer said, as long as the street is clear. Have a nice day. He handed me a warning slip about street parking and left. Linda stood there, vibrating with rage. She had played the police card. She had played the zoning card. She was running out of cards. "Wednesday," she said, her voice low and venomous. "The board meeting is Wednesday night. You better show up, Mason, because we are going to pass a new bylaw, a bylaw specifically written for you." "I wouldn't miss it for the world," I said. "I'll bring donuts." Wednesday night arrived. The community center meeting room was packed. Usually HOA meetings were attended by 3 people. Linda, her vice president, a man named Gary, who slept with his eyes open, and the treasurer. Tonight, the room was standing room only. I walked in with Dave, my lawyer friend. Dave was wearing a 3-piece suit that cost more than my truck. He carried a briefcase that looked like it contained nuclear launch codes. Linda sat at the head table. She looked smug. She banged a gavel. "Order!" she shouted. "Order in the hall!" The room quieted down. "We have one item on the agenda tonight," Linda announced. "Proposed Bylaw Amendment 42C, the prohibition of heavy weightlifting equipment and group exercise in front yards and driveways." She glared at me. "This amendment," she continued, "will ban the use of any exercise equipment exceeding 50 pounds in view of the street. It will also ban organized rhythmic physical activity by more than 2 people." "Organized rhythmic physical activity," Dave whispered to me. "Did she just ban dancing?" "I think she just banned fun," I whispered back. "I move to vote," Gary mumbled, waking up. "Seconded," said the treasurer. "Discussion?" Linda asked, purely as a formality. She expected silence. I stood up. "I'd like to speak." Linda rolled her eyes. "You have 2 minutes, Mr. Miller." I walked to the front. I didn't look at Linda. I looked at the crowd. I saw Tom. I saw Mike. I saw Sarah. I saw Mrs. Higgins with her pug. "Hi, everyone," I said. "Most of you know me. I'm the guy with the loud driveway. I know the noise has been unexpected, and I apologize if I woke anyone up before 6 a.m. "You woke me up at 6:01, Linda shouted. "But," I continued, "I want to talk about why I'm in the driveway. I'm there because I was locked out of this building. I was banned for dropping a weight. And since then, something interesting happened. We stopped being just neighbors who wave from cars. We started talking. We started sweating together. Mike lost 5 pounds this week. Tom hit a PR on his squat. Mrs. Higgins stopped by to ask about mobility exercises for her hip." Mrs. Higgins nodded vigorously. "He showed me a stretch that really helps." "This bylaw," I said, pointing at the paper in Linda's hand, "isn't about noise. The noise is legal. This is about control. It's about telling you what you can do on your own property. If you pass this, what's next? Banning basketball hoops? Banning kids playing tag? Banning gardening because the shovel is too loud?" I turned to Dave. "Dave?" Dave stood up. He adjusted his tie. "Good evening. I represent Mr. Miller. I have reviewed the proposed bylaw. I would like to inform the board that the language regarding organized physical activity is unconstitutionally vague and discriminatory. Furthermore, since the HOA Charter explicitly states that restrictions must be reasonable and beneficial to the property values, I have prepared a comparative market analysis." Dave pulled a chart from his briefcase. "Properties in neighborhoods with active community engagement and visible recreational culture actually sell for 4% more than restrictive neighborhoods. Mr. Miller isn't hurting your property values. He's increasing them. He's creating a lifestyle amenity at 0 cost to the association." The room murmured. Lifestyle amenity. It sounded fancy. "However," Dave continued, dropping the hammer, "if you pass this bylaw, we will file an immediate injunction for selective enforcement and harassment. We will depose every board member. We will audit the HOA financials to see exactly where the gym maintenance fees are going, considering the gym has been under renovation for months. The treasurer went pale. Linda's eye twitched. So, I said, stepping back in, you can vote for Linda's ban, or we can vote for a new board. Silence. Then Mike stood up. I nominate Mason for president. Seconded, yelled Tom. I nominate Sarah for vice president, shouted someone else. Linda banged the gavel so hard the head flew off and skittered across the floor. You can't do that. Elections are in November. Bylaw Section 8, Paragraph 3, Dave recited from memory. A vote of no confidence can be initiated at any general meeting if a quorum of 51% of homeowners is present. Dave looked around the packed room. I count 60 people. There are 90 homes. That's a quorum. Linda stood up, her face turning a color that didn't exist in nature. This is a coup! This is a mutiny! No, Linda, I said, smiling. This is CrossFit. The vote was a landslide. Linda was out. Gary was out. By 9:00 p.m., I was the president of the Oak Creek Estates HOA. My first act as president? I unlocked the community gym. I fired the quiet gym policy into the sun. I authorized the purchase of a proper deadlift platform for the community center. But the funny thing was, nobody really wanted to go back inside. The next morning, Thursday, 6:00 a.m., I walked out to my driveway. There were 10 people there. Mike, Tom, Sarah, Jake, even Officer Miller, who was off duty and wearing a Suns Out Guns out tank top. Mr. President, Mike saluted, holding a barbell. At ease, I said. What's the wad? Murph, Sarah said. In honor of the victory. Murph it is. We started the music. Not Pantera this time. We went with Queen. We Will Rock You. As we started the first mile run, jogging down the street in a pack, I looked at Linda's house. There was a for sale sign in the yard. She was standing in the window, watching us. She looked defeated. She looked small. I waved. She didn't wave back. She just closed the blinds. We ran past. The sun was coming up. The air was crisp. My legs burned. My lungs burned. I was surrounded by friends, by iron, and by the sweet, sweet taste of malicious compliance. I had built a gym to annoy one person. I ended up building a community. And yeah, we still dropped the weights. Loudly. Because gravity is the law. And in Oak Creek Estates, we follow the law.